if you have not heard, it is official that the Netherlands has just announced that they have officially entered a recession. Now, this comes I believe it like 2 months ago when I covered that Germany announced that they were entering a recession. And now we have the Netherlands. And what's interesting about the Netherlands, there's something I'm going to show you in reference to where they sit globally, in reference to their economy and their wealth. So this is very interesting. Germany had the fourth largest economy in the world. They entered a recession, and now we have the Netherlands. And I think people need to pay attention to what's happening here. So let's go ahead and start with this article. And then I have a couple of clips that I want to show you as well. The Dutch economy has slid into recession as inflation and interest rates hit exports and spending. Let's go ahead and dive in. It's a pretty short article here by AP. The Netherlands has fallen into a recession after exports and household spending fell back amid rising interest rates intended to rein in inflation. The country's statistics office reported Wednesday. The economy declined by 0.3% in the second quarter after shrinking 0.4% in the first 3 months of the year, Statistics Netherlands reported. The Netherlands, a small nation that has long punched above its weight in global trade, is now treading water after its robust rebound following the pandemic, says the Statistics Office chief economist Peter Hein van Mulligen. After the pandemic, the Dutch economy recovered much quicker and stronger than the rest of Europe. In the last year, that has turned around. So, what is happening with the Netherlands? Why are they entering a recession right now? Well, first, I want to go back to what happened to the Netherlands 10 months ago when they were facing an energy crisis. And there were actually households that decided to cut themselves off from gas completely. Let's go ahead and get into this clip here from Al Jazeera.
The only gas Wilma Marais still uses is for the tea lights, used for her improvised stove. The terracotta pots retain heat, which helps keep her a little warmer as the colder weather approaches. The shop owner decided to have her gas cut off after her bill doubled to $345 a month, with a warning from her provider that it could reach $700.
Nou, de winkel die zet heel weinig om.
My shop has hardly any income. I lost customers during the COVID-19 pandemic, and now inflation is so high, people don't have money to buy children's clothes. So my income has really dropped below minimum. I know I can't pay these high energy bills.
Let's pause here for a second. This was also happening to people here in Massachusetts, those that had, I forget the name of the company. I don't have them, because we have propane. I forget the name of the company. But anyway, this was happening to people in Massachusetts too, where people were getting $500 electric bills during the winter. Remember, this was 10 months ago in the Netherlands, but people were getting $500, $600 electric bills, and there was nothing they could do because natural gas, they're the ones that is a large provider for people here in Massachusetts. And basically, people that lived in apartments, when they would confront their landlords or their property managers, they would tell them, like, why the heck is my utility bill, my gas bill, all of a sudden $500, and I live in a 1-bedroom apartment. I'm not here from like 8 to 5 during the day because I'm at work. Why is my bill so high? Those residents were told that there was nothing that the property managers could do about it because it was National Grid. Sorry, I said natural gas. National Grid. They said it was National Grid's fault. That's where it comes from. So there was nothing the apartment complexes could do about it. So there were people, $500 in a 1-bedroom apartment, and you're not even there half the day? It's a lot. It's a lot. Again, this is all going into this issue with Russia and Ukraine, and of course, inflation. Everything went up. Let's continue.
While it's getting colder in her house behind these doors, millions of chrysanthemums are thriving in warm temperatures. But greenhouse farmers depend on gas to continue operating during winter. and many have decided to stop growing flowers and vegetables in the next few months, something that could seriously affect Dutch exports.
Normally, if we have like every year like 10% extra cost, it's not a problem, but it's now like 10 times more than 2 years ago. It's crazy. In this way, if nobody can survive, no company, no people with a household, nobody.
With new techniques that use less fossil fuels, Wouter Duivenstein hopes to be able to continue his business, although he's worried that the prices of flowers will climb so high that demand will dry up.
The Dutch pay twice as much for gas as other Europeans due to hefty energy tax and their dependence on gas to generate electricity.
So did you guys hear that? That the Dutch actually pay twice as much for gas than other European countries. So that's problem number one. And then problem number two was obviously the inflation.
And while other EU members have kept their energy prices, the Dutch government is being accused of doing too little, too late.
Protesters carrying flags upside down booed the royal family after King Willem-Alexander delivered his annual budget address, promising a price cap on energy and $18 billion to compensate poor families. A recent survey suggests that 7 in 10 Dutch citizens have lost trust in the government.
If you get problems of whether you can pay your food and energy, because that's what we're talking about, even if they work full-time, if they can still pay the basic necessities, then yeah, that's the best way of eroding trust in your own government.
Opposition parties say that the government's aid package has not been thought through and fear it won't be enough to keep the country warm this winter, and that plans to support entrepreneurs to keep their businesses running are too vague and have come too late. Step Vassen, Al Jazeera, Hoek van Holland, the Netherlands.
So 10 months ago, the Netherlands had to deal with the energy crisis. So they already had that issue. Now they've entered a recession. But there's something that I noticed. And when we look at countries in reference to total wealth, I decided to look this up because I was just curious to see how wealthy is the Netherlands. And I want to show you something. If we look at this table here, these are countries by wealth. Okay. Watch this. So number one is the US, US. Then when we get to Europe, you'll see China. Then we get to Asia Pacific, Japan, Germany, UK, France, India. So we're rounding out the top 10 with South Korea. That being said, the Netherlands is number 14. The Netherlands is the 17th largest in the world, the economy. That was according to the World Bank. So it's not like the Netherlands is at the bottom of the list. They're not at the top of the list, but still 17th largest economy in the world. So that makes you wonder what happened? Where did all that money go? What did they do with all the wealth? Why are they having this struggle and entering this recession? I said the same thing with Germany, 4th largest economy in the world, and they still entered this recession. But as much as we bring up recessions, oftentimes we're not told how you can prevent one. And I think you need to hear that. Now, the Netherlands, what I think is really important is that we are seeing countries that are a part of the West go into a recession. And over again, for the past year and a half, I've listened to mainstream media tell us the United States is not going into a recession. But these are our allies. It's happening to Germany. It is now happening to the Netherlands. And you'll constantly hear all of these economists and mainstream media pundits announce when someone's going into a recession, when someone's coming out of a recession, but I never hear them tell you how to prevent one. Second Thought actually did just that. And I think you're going to want to hear this. How do you prevent going into a recession? Listen to this.
Planned economy. With a planned economy, we can control more industries democratically, produce in line with our needs, not randomly having every company producing as much as possible, which not only destroys the livability of our planet, but crashes the economy when profits don't catch up. Instead of relying on profit to guide our investments, we could simply invest in the things we want to see happen, with democratically run financial institutions instead of privately controlled banks that only follow the logic of growth to assess whether something is worth doing. Alternatively, think of something like a mutual aid network today. Mutual aid.
Pause right there. That's music to my ears when I heard those words, a mutual aid network. So second thought is explaining that what we don't have is a planned economy. So he said, instead of us relying on banks to basically make regulations, what if all of these companies actually had a democratic process instead of us relying on the banks? Let's go on a little bit here, because I think this is really important for people to hear. People continue to tell me we can't mutual aid our way out of this. We can't just only do mutual aid. We can't do these things. Listen to this.
To see happen, with democratically run financial institutions instead of privately controlled banks that only follow the logic of growth to assess whether something is worth doing. Alternatively, think of something like a mutual aid network today. Mutual aid doesn't do for GDP. GDP doesn't have any way of measuring something that's done freely. It just doesn't consider it to exist. Since mutual aid networks are often just people working together to improve their lives, providing each other with services and sometimes goods, usually without money changing hands, as long as those things remain insular to the collective, life gets better without GDP moving an inch.
Did everybody just hear that? Life gets better without GDP moving an inch. Because when they assess the economy mainly by GDP. And there have been times when GDP has actually been really great for the US, but economically people are not doing great. And we've talked about this oftentimes, like Donald Trump would talk about this, Biden would talk about this, Obama would talk about this. They say the GDP is doing great. But people were still struggling to find jobs. People still were making $7.25 an hour, federal minimum wage. It seems like that's the only thing they would talk about was GDP, not what's happening in people's actual lives. Let's continue.
Economies don't need growth for life to be good or for life to improve. When the motivation for doing stuff is democratic will, not profit, life gets better without some rich guy's bank account getting bigger.
There's a difference between doing good for the people, for your community, and making a profit. And unfortunately, in our society, it's almost like everything is profit driven. Everything. Look at Big Pharma, for example. Why don't we have healthcare for everybody in this country, right? Because that's not profitable for Big Pharma. It's just the reality. They need to charge for medication so that they can make a profit. So you have to think about these kinds of things. And if we live in a society that is always profit driven, sometimes it can be hard to tell if people are actually doing anything for the greater good or they're just doing it to make a profit. When you look at something like mutual aid, there's no profit, no financial profit. So you're helping people, you're feeding people, you're clothing people within the community. You're not making any money off of that. So how do you know the difference? How do you tell if the job that's being done is being done just for profit or if it's being done for the greater good? And sometimes the lines can be blurred.
It's the exact opposite of austerity and recessions. It's abundance for all, even in the midst of bad numbers. And I get that this is abstract. The bottom line is that when capitalists aren't in charge, we don't need to satisfy their needs before societies, or hope that the two coincide. It's actually really simple. People before profits.
There you go. The important thing is to get the capitalists out of the way. As long as they're in charge, as long as they have control, it's never going to be great for everyone. There's always going to be people at the bottom. There's always going to be people without jobs. There's always going to be people without health care because we live in a capitalist system. But imagine, instead of us having one person at the top at all these different companies, what if everybody was on equal playing field? Instead of this top bottom structure that we have, a lot of organizations have, what if it was horizontal? That's the difference between mutual aid and charity, by the way. This is why I don't donate to charity organizations. I told you guys last night about the Red Cross. Charities have a top-down structure. Mutual aid networks have a horizontal structure. Everybody on the same page. Everybody is at the same level. And if you're going to go that far, well, then why not start worker co-ops? Why not start worker co-ops so that everybody owns a piece of the company and a fair share of it, not one person owning the company and everybody working for that one person? Because most of the time, when there is one that is in charge, their salary, their profit is not going to be the same as the people who are below them. There's no capitalism without exploitation. And this is why I continue to say that people who are billionaires didn't get there in an honest way. You don't become a billionaire by not exploiting people. You exploited someone along the way to get there. How do you prevent recessions? You put people before profits. Pass this on to people. We need to talk about prevention. A lot of times we talk about the problem. Sometimes we talk about a possible response to the problem. But I think we need to start focusing more on prevention.
Now, does this mean no more crises? No, definitely not. Another global pandemic, a massive drought, or a war can all still cause problems. Some things just can't be avoided entirely. That's the reality of life. We can prepare, but we can't always prevent. That said, within a socialist framework, the consequences don't have to be so bad because the first priority isn't company profits. An economy that prioritizes human well-being would simply continue to do so even in the midst of a crisis, unlike a growth economy which is ready to sacrifice collective good for a small group of people's numbers to look better. A crisis can be weathered, instead of becoming an excuse to cut social services and grow the capitalist share of the pie, like what happens after every crisis in this decaying neoliberal era. I know this might sound utopian, but it's really not. It's necessary. It's common sense. We cannot keep chasing infinite growth on a planet with finite resources. And we cannot keep punishing average people for the greed of a few capitalists. We can get rid of recessions. Life can be better for all of us.
Second thought, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to see the full video, because it's actually a 19-minute video, I want to put this back up here really quick to show you. It's called The Truth About Recessions. Check that out when you have some time. Second thought. But yeah, the Netherlands is officially in a recession. I'm going to go to some of the comments here in the chat. Thank you for the super chat, M. Smith. We are already in a recession. Our government is lying. There are more homeless people now than ever. Just walk the streets of any city. I agree. They're always afraid to say the R word. Have you noticed that? I think they're afraid that people will panic. Thank you for the super chat, Roger. Co-op ownership of manufacturing and supply chains. There you go. You're speaking my language. You're speaking my language, Roger. I'm telling you, we got to do something different.